Hello and welcome to the Learning to Slay the Beast podcast, a resilience podcast where we talk about all the challenging things that we're working to overcome, like anxiety, health, and relationship issues. My name is Sarah. So this week on the podcast, I thought it would be so fun to do a best of 2021. Honestly, I have been blessed with so many amazing people that have been on the podcast this year, have been willing to sit down and chat with me and go through a bunch of different questions and share their knowledge. And we've had so many different variety in terms of guests. We've had things that focused on parenting. We've had discussions that focused on self-care, focusing on pandas, pans, and a number of different topics all throughout the year. So when I got to putting this episode together, honestly, I realized there was so much that I wanted to share. So what I'm going to do is split the best of 2021 between two episodes. This part one episode, which is the 99th episode of the podcast, goes all the way up until the end of the summer. And then we will start with the back to school special, the Pandas Pans month that we did as well, and the followed up variety of conversations from the end of the year will go into part two, which will be part of our 100th episode. So I'm really excited to bring you these best of. It's just going to keep kind of rolling through the episodes. I'll introduce the number and the title of each episode before the clip, and then you can have a great idea if you want to hear more about the episode and the clip wasn't enough of which episode to go back to. So enjoy this listen as we wrap up 2021. Are you looking for a way to satisfy your sweet tooth without the filler? Try Monk Pack. They make keto granola bars and keto seed and nut bars, as well as protein cookies. They come in plenty of flavors like the almond butter cocoa chip keto granola bar and the caramel sea salt keto nut and seed bar. They're great tasting, they're plant-based, gluten-free, low sugar, non-GMO, and no sugar alcohols. You can just enjoy these freely. You can go ahead and visit Monk Pack. Monk is spelled MUNKPACK.com. And in order to get a special discount, you can use my discount code REALLIFE15, all one word, to get 15% off your order. Visit monkpack.com today to try all of these amazing low sugar products. Episode 49, Run Happy with Stephen Beerbrier. And so I guess I'm thinking a lot about New Year's resolutions, and a lot of people at this time of year are, probably looking at your Instagram or different fitness enthusiasts and saying, okay, I want to run, I want to be active, but they just don't know where to start. So what would you say to somebody who's kind of having that feeling?
Well, first of all, way to go. The first day of the rest of your life. But even though we are as humans and we want the finish line right away, we have to start with like goals that are attainable. And the problem with things like New Year's resolutions, and I don't make them, I just live.
Yeah,
I used to make resolutions, but the thing about resolutions is they've been proven that you make it on January 1st, by February 14th, you've stopped doing it, right? Because you've created this expectation, you've put numbers into it. I want to run 10K. I want to lose this amount of pounds. I want and so what I would say is start small. Step one, start small. Don't keep the eye on the prize, but start small and do you don't have to run 10K. Let's start with 1K and let's see how that feels and see how you are doing at that point. But from that is number two is to be consistent. We want to build a healthy habit. And so going out for your 5K run, feeling afterwards like crap because you just push yourself too fast, too quickly, and then basically shutting it all down for 8 days and then going into the potato chip, world, is not going to help you. So keep it small, keep it consistent, and really find whatever it is. Like we're talking about running right now, but it goes to anything. It's like that feeling, like because I could tell you that doing a spin bike is the best for you, but if you hate it the first time, why would you do it again? You know? And so, and this is, I'm going to do a shameless plug here, but there's a great book out there called Feel Like It. I've said it a few times, but Feel Like It by Dr. Kelly Dell, who's local. And you can find it on all the sites. But it's really about the feeling. And he's done the research, and it's like, you like in the old days, remember when there were gyms and studios and you can go in there, but you drop the coin because you were like New Year's resolution and you're going to do this, but it wasn't you. It wasn't your true authentic self.
Right.
So step one is almost like taking a step back and like on a piece of paper, figuring out what are the things that you like to do. And if you don't know, that's okay, because there are so many things out there. But to try those new things, whether it's running, cycling, walking just straight out, cross-country skiing, snowshoeing, like I'm trying to think of things in the winter, skating, and find the one that when you're doing it, there seems to be like an uptick in the happiness quotient.
Episode 50, Pandas Pants Fundamentals with Dr. Scott and Ellen Antoine.
When this first happened, when we saw Emma and we did some lab work on her, we found out that she had actually Lyme disease, which she likely contracted in Michigan at her summer camp, which is one of the causes of PANS. She also had really high streptococcal titers, meaning that may have been a past exposure or a current exposure as well. It's difficult to tell sometimes. I'd say diagnosis is the first beginning of treatment, really. So I always tell parents, you have to be a bit careful. Sometimes when you're on the internet, people will insist that you have to do this test or that test. Really, it's a clinical diagnosis. It's based on signs, symptoms, what the child in front of you looks like, and also excluding other things. So being sure to exclude a central nervous system problem like a mass. Some of these children may need an MRI or other testing. A very acutely ill child likely would need hospitalization and check for meningitis and infections of the brain and fluid around the brain. But once you've established your diagnosis, then looking to treatment. And so we looked back on that a few years after she got better and said, what did we do? What did we find? And so we formulated a process. And so the process we use for adult patients and for children with PANS, and we call it the fully functional process. And what we do basically is the first step is, as I'd said, identifying what's going on. The next step, there's 5 steps. So the second step is reduce. So we try and reduce those things that are negatively impacting their health. So we look at diet. So a lot of foods are inflammatory, certainly processed sugars, preservatives, things like that, but also things like gluten, and in some people, dairy. And we also test these children for food allergies and sensitivities because they can produce neurologic signs and symptoms. In fact, if you find IgG reactions to foods in children and eliminate them, the studies have shown in the neurology journals, you can eliminate childhood migraines. So we do some of those things, try and identify what's going on, reduce the things that are negatively impacting their health. That also has to do with reducing stress. So we like to make sure, if we can, these children are in some form of therapy, and really it has to be family therapy. This, as you know, affects everyone. And so once we've done that, and we've listened to those things and see what we can find, then we try and optimize detoxification. That's our third step, optimize. So you're looking at things to optimize detoxification. There are some supplements and things that can increase child's ability to detoxify through their liver. I will tell you that the vast majority of children that we see with PANS, and even adults with other types of neuropsychiatric complaints, have issues with detoxification. So what happens is they get into an environment, commonly can be a moldy house, or eating lots of processed foods, or living near a field where people are spraying chemicals, and that disrupts the immune system. Then an infection, which in most kids would be pretty benign, like maybe a strep throat, suddenly produces all of these symptoms. And so once we've optimized detoxification, then we support. And so we try and support the family. We support the child, and we look at supporting their immune system. There's some specific things you can do for that, both some supplements, and then there are some other medications we use, like low-dose naltrexone. It's a medication that really has a great effect on stabilizing the immune system and helping a lot with behavior. Other specific key treatments, obviously, are if you're finding a specific infection to treat and you feel like it's what's driving the behavior, then you treat it. And so there are times when we use antibiotics. There are other times where we use herbal medications to treat infections. It just depends on the setting and what we've found. And then you can do some other treatments as well, and other things you can try. This is an inflammatory disorder, so you can try simple things. We try and stay natural, so we will usually start out with curcumin. It's a great natural anti-inflammatory. It also has some antibacterial properties, so it's a good choice. If not, we can also try either ibuprofen or naproxen sodium. I'm not sure what that would be called where you are, but I think that's the generic name. And then moving up from there, if you have if you have to use antibiotics, we will use antibiotics. And then if you have a severely affected child, you can look at immunomodulatory therapies. And so there are basically several things. Steroids, technically, prednisone, things like that fall in this category. Those are things that re-regulate the immune system, decrease inflammation, and help with symptoms. You have to be a bit careful. Some children do not respond well, and it will make their agitation a lot worse. So you have to be extremely careful when you're trying that. It's not the answer for everyone. And then ultimately, some children may go on, and because of our organized regimen approach, it's not very many of our kids that will go on to require IV, IG, or intravenous immunoglobulin infusion. So it's probably less than 20%, actually. And there are some other immunomodulatory treatments you can do. Plasmapheresis is one, which kind of think of that as filtering the blood. And then there are some other medications. Rituximab is a medicine you can use, which is immunosuppressive medicine. Not my favorite. None of those things are my favorite. You use them when you need to. But certainly if you can interrupt things before that, re-regulate the immune system, treat the infection, a lot of these children will recover.
Episode 51, Reducing Stress to Lose Fat with Lidio DiFrancesco.
So getting enough sleep. Honestly, I've now prioritized that over nutrition and fitness when I'm working with clients. Yeah, wow. It's something that I've really learned over the last year that has the most significant impact. Because if you think about it, if you don't have a good enough sleep, like I said, it definitely messes up your hunger. So it'll affect your hunger hormones. So we have the hunger hormones for to tell your body that you're hungry, and you have hormones that tell your body that you're full. And when you don't sleep well, those get messed up. So the hormone that tells you that you're hungry is ramped up. And so you constantly are feeling hungry, and you eat and you don't feel full because the full feeling hormone is decreased. And so it's totally messed up. Wow. And I'm sure that you've had this, and I'm sure the listeners have experienced this, when you feel so hungry the entire day and you feel like you can't eat enough. And that's not just you. It's actually a hormonal thing, and it's that the hormones are messed up, and it's because of a lack of sleep.
I remember after I had my son.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I felt that way, because you're so sleep deprived with a baby, and I would just literally reach for a handful of chocolate chips or something like that, because you're just you just want the sugar. So when you mentioned the sugar craving, that totally makes sense. Episode 52, A Parental Perspective on Pandas Pans with Richard and Marnie Deshane. Then where are you guys now in your journey for both children?
Yeah, well, since accessing the care, we went to the States in October 2016. We were able to connect with a pediatrician here in Calgary. So in August 2017, that happened. So that took over our older son's care, plus diagnosed our younger son, which we mentioned earlier. So both of our boys have seen the most noticeable results from IVIG. That means, for those that don't know, intravenous immunoglobulin treatment and blood work. So our older boy has had 4 rounds and the younger one has had 2. So seeing our boys respond well to the IVIG treatment blew us away. And it really made us firm believers that PANDAS is real, and the inflammation needs to be, and it can be, medically treated. So there, was question and doubt, but that put that by the wayside.
Yeah, and I'm just going to explain the way I've described post-IVIG recovery in the past to others is for our boy anyways, and it felt so like distinct. So, he gets the IVIG, and there was first this uptick in symptoms, kind of this herxing, and I called it a Pandas exorcism because, our wall, drywall, we had a hole in it, punched in there from him kicking it. And then, and I had to actually restrain him one time, and, those are not good memories. And then there was a slow, steady cooling. This was more like by month 3 and 4, because that was the first sort of 4, 6 to 8 weeks of the process. And then a steady cooling of his immune system where I noticed this drop in symptoms, and he was getting so much calmer, still not fully there. And then it was like, by about 7 months, 6, 7 months, but prominently at 7 months, I call it that he came out of a Pandas coma, and he really started to live again. And it honestly gives me goosebumps just thinking about it right now. And just, him going into the pantry and going, "Mom, where is this?" And he's giggling because he never went into our pantry ever. And it was just so refreshing that I didn't have to hand over hand everything for him. Right. So their last IVIG, was January 2019. And so both of the boys, we do everything in tandem. They made it through this past winter without a relapse. And then they spent most of their time at home due to COVID restrictions. And so we decided to stop their prophylactic antibiotics in April of last year. So it's been a marathon journey, but also I call it a miracle journey, to see the transformation in our sons after what seemed like an impossible journey to overcome. And our older son experienced many social and academic challenges around school because of symptoms such as severe anxiety, mutism, and dysgraphia. Those are tough ones to just regain back. But to see him come to life after years on and off struggling, it's truly a miracle of his recovery, I do believe. And our younger son's onset also happened at age 7, as I referenced earlier, but his presenting symptoms were not as sudden at his onset. And maybe it's because I was so impacted by our older boy and just taking care of him. But his became more severe with each relapse, continued relapse. So, but his 2 IVIG treatments have also, provided the greatest impact on his recovery. And for many years, I continued to doubt myself each time a doctor would close the door, right? But today I know our story represents hope to others. We did make it through the other side. I'm not saying everything is perfect, not at all, because our younger son, I'm noticing just a little bit of these, like, "Mom, my brain felt stuck today. I had a hard time doing math, So I'm just, I'm making notes, but it's nothing like it was.
No. Episode 57, Grief, Loss, and Self-Care with Amanda Ferret.
I now have the label of disabled, and I've had to learn how to accept and honor that. And I've had to kind of teach my mom, and my family, like, what that means, and my friends. And it's a tricky kind of loss because it isn't that kind of, when people die, that's something we've all, had some sort of experience in, whether it's from the movies or real life or whatever. But these changes in relationships and function and having to rewrite these stories of what might have been and changes in roles where sometimes we don't have support, right? So maybe we don't have any representation of what it looks like to now be a parent in those roles, or a person living with that identity or that disability or that diagnosis. So for those folks, education, right? The more you know, the more power you have. Representation matters. So find community, find parent support groups, family support groups, whatever you can find. And if you can't find them, try to create them, right? Like community matters and getting that community support. And then as far as like my approach with folks, it's going to be like an onion, peeling back those layers and knowing that we might bounce back and forth and have to do a little more work and spend a little more time and care. And I'm going to have to approach it with a little more compassion, because it is really complicated when you throw in 3 or 4 types of loss and then add the grief on top of that and add whatever's going on in their environment and whatever the behaviors that change, right? And it becomes messy. And the more messy and complicated it can be, the more I have to kind of take my time to peel back and kind of take one piece at a time, because we're storytellers too by nature. As humans, we tell stories. We've told stories from the dawn of time. And when families have to rewrite their stories, and they have to rewrite it for themselves, for that other family member, for the family as an entire unit, for how that family then functions in their neighborhood, their community, their greater family, that's a lot to unpack. It's a lot to learn how to cope with and manage. And so, you know, it takes a longer kind of approach of just helping them figure out what those new roles are, how things are going to function, what those relationships look like, what new relationships do they need to bring in support, what systems do they need for support, what is and isn't working, and then start to rewrite those stories in a way that honors everybody's feelings and needs and new roles and relationships so that everybody can feel seen and valued and heard. I think that's the biggest piece.
Episode 59, Treating Pandas, Pans, and Lyme with Dr. Roseanne Capana-Hodge. And so why don't you get into a little bit more? You talked about brain mapping and neurofeedback, like some of the key treatments that you're using and that you've really seen success with. Both you can talk about Lyme, Pandas, any of the areas.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Sarah, you know, what I learned, and we have a couple things coming up that really go into this. One is we have the summit, the Get Unstuck Parenting Summit. And I have a book called It's Gonna Be Okay. And both of these things, really, what do they encompass and why did I do them? So one, doesn't matter what the issue is. It doesn't matter if your kid has anxiety. It doesn't matter if they have depression or bipolar or PANS, PANDAS, or OCD. You have to concentrate on lifestyle changes. And as hard as that seems, like sometimes people would rather come to me and spend tens of thousands of dollars doing other treatments, right? And I'm like, but we got to give up, you know, this, right? Which is typically sugar, gluten, and dairy. Right. And people are like, oh my God, how am I going to do it? You know? And I always share the same story that I had a mom with 3 kids with PANS. Okay. And they also had autism.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. Right. And one of them was really aggressive and she did it.
Yeah. And she had her hands full. Yeah.
She had her hands full. Okay, people. So I literally hold my bar to her and she was like, Roseanne, she was, you know, some of the moms that I really adore. Oh my God, they're hysterical. I mean, she was like, it sucked.
At the beginning is always the worst. Yeah, for sure.
And you know, she tried the step in. There's no right way. There's no wrong way. It's the way that's right for you. Okay. So she tried the step in. Okay. Like, so one of her kids did I could replace things, but her PANS, very impaired autistic child was like, it ain't happening. So she had to do the 10 days of like, you know, you can break a behavior. 10 days is the height. Most behaviors can be broken in 10 days. This is from, you know, operant conditioning and classical conditioning. You can change and replace a behavior in 10 days. Okay. And it requires a lot of patience and consistency. And she did the 10 days, you know, and she was like, oh, it was brutal. And then, you know, now he's the kid that eats like my kid, like the calamari and gluten-free bagel or whatever it is. Yep. She's got it. You know, he's taken fish oil, he's, you know, whatever. And she noticed a difference. So We have to use the key to all of these things, right? There is no magic pill. There is no magic fairy, I don't have a wand, right? I actually have a plastic wand at my desk because sometimes people,
you need it.
I need it. And sometimes I got to have the speak to Jesus conversation with you or whoever else, Buddha, whatever it is, just using an analogy. And sometimes people call me and they're like, I did 2 sessions of neuro and I'm a little upset. I don't notice a difference. And I was like, did you read a damn thing that I gave you or anything that I told you? It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
If your friend had a miracle in 2 sessions, which it happens, that just is what it is. I don't know what but what we need to do is we need to get every ounce that we can to shift it and create that change and move that dial.
Do you love the Learning to Slay the Beast podcast? Well, first of all, thank you so much. Second of all, if you love the podcast and you want more and more to keep coming, I would love your support through Ko-fi.com. Ko-fi.com is a way that you can put a little money towards your favorite podcast. It can be as little as a few dollars, one time, bunch of times, whatever you feel that you can give. And it helps to cover all the costs that go associated with podcasting. So if you would like to support this podcast, please consider donating through Ko-fi.com. You can find the link in my Instagram feed under Linktree. It's at Sarah Lady Gluten, or you can visit Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/learning to slay the beasts. I appreciate your support, whether you can give or not. Thanks so much for listening. Episode 61, Radical Self-Acceptance and Being Gluten-Free with Carrie Veach.
Yes, I really believe it is. And it's, I don't know if it was an old coach of mine, or I'm sure it was, along with other places. But it's basically your most practiced thoughts are your thoughts. And I just find that to be completely true, right? Like as I practice anything, it becomes more natural.
Right.
Like, like when I'm working with a client and they're kind of frustrated or feeling like it's taking a really long time or whatever, I often say, okay, let's think about something that you learned as an adult, because I think when you learn something as a kid, it's a little bit different. But let's think about something you learned as an adult. And maybe it's you took up skiing or you started yoga. Like when you first started, you felt really awkward. You didn't know what to do. And you didn't like show up on day one and were a master of this practice or this sport. Like you had to keep showing up day after day. And so I think what can happen with thought work or with changing our life, right? But this whole concept of changing your life from the inside out is that we can start something, stick with it for maybe a week, and then we're like, oh, it doesn't work. It's not working. And I'm just like, well, if we had all given up on skiing, let's say after, 1-2 lessons, we probably wouldn't be a good skier.
Episode 62, Raising Strong, Confident Daughters with Anasha Khan. I'd love it if you could touch on some of the really effective ways that you talked about in the blog in terms of raising a strong, confident daughter.
Yeah, so here's the thing. Boys are taught to be somebody, while girls are taught to find somebody. As moms and our daughters' first teachers, we should teach our girls to be somebody first, and that someone should be lucky to find her.
Right.
We want to teach our daughters to let their voices be heard, to speak up. She doesn't need to be rude or the loudest person in the room, but simply someone who speaks her truth and stands for what she believes in. And it's okay if no one else agrees with her, because the truth is, Sarah, we are not made for everyone, and that's okay. She just needs to believe in the power her voice carries. And for the latter part of the question, I believe was, when do I encourage her versus letting her find her own way? And I think the notion of letting her find her own way can create so much anxiety for us moms, The focus should be on communication and trust. And that's exactly what I use with Sophia. Have complete trust in yourself and in your little girl. Trust that the values you've instilled in her will help her make the right decisions. Have regular conversations with your child where you allow her to do most of the talking. If you don't quite understand the situation, you can repeat what she just said so she can clarify that for you. You can also recognize the difference between your child's need and your needs, because sometimes we think what we need is what our kids need. And, set boundaries for yourself so that you can give her room to grow. And that's probably going to be the hardest part for us, where we actually have to set boundaries so we can, let our kids grow and explore life on their own.
Episode 63, Finding Food Freedom with Melissa Rolfs.
Absolutely. I'm a big proponent of teaching women how to listen to their bodies and honor their hunger and fullness. I think a lot of times we're conditioned or taught that, we have to eat lunch at noon. Well, if you're hungry before noon, it's perfectly okay to honor that hunger and eat lunch when your body tells you it's hungry instead of when we've been conditioned to believe that we need to eat because it's a certain time.
Right. Yeah. And I find that especially days when I work out in the morning, that then I am hungrier earlier, and it's just like, I'm not going to be able to wait.
Yep. Absolutely.
But and fasting, there's been such a promotion of fasting, different types of fasting. But that, really challenges your hunger cues as well, because you're sort of, you're trying to almost trick your body, have coffee or something that allows you to wait on food. And so that's kind of counter to something like that. Yeah. Exactly.
I'm not a big fan of that. And again, it's not, I know some people do it well for various reasons, but there's a lot of people that shouldn't be fasting that do. For example, if you have some blood sugar challenges, it's not great for that. There's a lot of things, if you have disordered eating, I feel like it can really kind of set you up to be back in that position. So I'm not a fan of it, and I'm probably going to be booed for that. But it's more about really honoring and respecting your body and what it needs.
No, I agree. I have tried it. I've done a whole bunch of different ones. I was doing where, 2 days a week sort of spread out. It was fast throughout the day, and then only kind of having a smoothie midday. And in terms of weight control, it helped, but you're right. I found for me, and I think it's my history with, having kind of an eating disorder or disordered eating, however you want to say it, that I started to get into almost like that binge cycle again, where then it would be like, I'd come off the fast and be like, well, it doesn't matter because I fasted all day yesterday. So, I can eat this or that, as compared to kind of, I think for me, those small meals throughout the day tends to be, and maybe that's blood sugar wise as well, but just tends to be a more sustainable type of eating for myself. And I feel satisfied, and I feel like it's not this deprivation thing, I guess.
Absolutely. Because I don't know about you, Sarah, but when I deprive, that's when I would binge, because I'm hungry, I'm famished, and then it's, all out, I'll eat anything in sight, because my body was depleted and it needed what it wasn't getting.
That's what I found. And I think there are benefits. A lot of people talk about mental clarity. I can see that, and also even lifestyle wise, you're not having to prepare whatever that meal would have been, a little bit more time. But I just found in the long term, it wasn't something that I could keep doing. And I felt cranky, and I, all of those things. So, it is a challenge then moving from that, though, because the moment you start to pick up those meals again, it's like there is a weight gain. And so you've got to really watch that, I think, for sure. But I'm not a huge fan. And again, I know it works for some people. I know it does.
Absolutely. But we're all different. And I love your, perspective, Sarah, that, this isn't great for the long term. And I think that's maybe sometimes where we get caught up, is that we don't think in terms of long term and health and sustainability and lifestyle. And we think about that immediate result. And so we'll do something to get that immediate result, but then we realize we just can't keep up with it.
Episode 65, Homeopathic Treatment of Pandas and Pans with Dr. Jennifer Barr.
fantastic question. So what we practice here at Resilience Naturopathic is classical homeopathy. There's a lot of different schools of thought with homeopathy where people are, generally, of course, always trying to make it easier, better, faster. We really focus on the tried and true method that was established over 200 years ago and that has stood the test of time and still is quite effective today. And so we do a single remedy at a time. One thing that's really fantastic about homeopathy that makes it so well suited for kids with PANS and PANDAS is that it is a whole person medicine. So what we're looking at is not just the symptoms of PANS. Like you can't come into a homeopath and say, I would really like the OCD that my kiddo is experiencing to go away. Can we just focus on the OCD? That won't work because oftentimes even the thing that you're most concerned about isn't necessarily the thing that's going to give us the indication for the remedy that we need to stimulate healing. So we have to look at the totality because the reality is the OCD might not be that unique. It might be pretty common, like to any of the kids who have OCD is one of their primary concerns with PANS or PANDAS. So the OCD itself might not be unique, even if it's the most problematic. What might be unique is the bowel function or the a type of anxiety that they have that's not related to the OCD, but is very specific and unique. Or it could be a rash that they have, could be what's the most indicative. That being said, even if we're looking at some of the physical concerns or things that you consider to be like tangential, like if this stayed around forever, I could deal with it. Please, please, please just focus on get rid of the OCD or get rid of the rage. Even when we're focusing on these things that seem like they're to the side, they could actually still show improvements in the main thing that you're concerned about. So we always have to look at the totality, the global symptoms, and we're always looking for improvements as a whole person. And the reason we really have to focus on this is a truly healing approach. And so when you think about it, like our body, our brain, everything is connected. So when we heal as a whole person. So that's one of the ways that it's really different and why we have to take a look at the totality of everything that's going on.
Okay. And one of the ways that it's totally different than conventional medicine for sure.
Yes, absolutely. And you're definitely not going to leave when you're seeing a classically trained homeopath who's actually practicing classical Hahnemannian homeopathy, you're going to leave with one remedy and not a whole list of things to do. So it's, kind of nice for parents too.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, and I think one of the things that's been surprising to me is sometimes there are things going on that you don't even know is a PANDAS thing. Like I've had that experience where, I get questions about, well, what about, does he ever have this kind of rash or have you ever seen this type of behavior or whatever? And you don't even realize that it's something. I think that's really eye-opening, but it makes sense that then once you weed through all of those things, you kind of get a better healing in the end. That makes a lot of sense. Episode 67, The Importance of the Mother-Daughter Connection with Amelia Mora Mars. And so, it seems like that bond is been very influential throughout your life and it does stick. And I guess I'm just thinking about, so then how do you repair that? Is there an ability to repair or there are certain tools, I guess, that you use to help women heal that?
Yeah, when I designed my program, I really thought a lot about it, taking the research because my specialization was attachment when I went to school because I had that fascination. And but then also, what were the steps and the processes that I went through to get myself in a better place? So I designed my program to really, number one, start with the person's attachment style. Because I think as women, we can be very critical of ourselves, very judgmental, very perfectionistic. And sometimes when you understand that there's these 4 different attachment styles and why you might have the one you have and what led up to that, there's a sense of understanding, like, of course I'm like this. Why wouldn't I be like this if I had this type of mothering? And so I always start there with the moms. Okay, what is your attachment style? And then she wants to do the attachment style with her daughters too, or her children, just to have understanding with them. And then that self-love piece, because again, I was so trained I had this profound amount of love for my siblings and for my mom. And, Latinos are a collectivist society. It's very much about the we. So I did we really well, but I struggled with the me. Mm-hmm. And so helping women to start to differentiate, because that's a process that we should have gone through growing up, where I could be myself. Like I can have a bunch of siblings, but I'm still me. It's not like we're all clumped together. And so helping women to have that self-love, because I feel like that self-love is the salve that really heals the soul, and to turn the love and attention inward that has been, most of our lives outward, giving, people pleasing, rescuing, serving, that fear of abandonment, that keeps us really stuck, full of anxiety.
Episode 68, Overcoming Crohn's Disease and Chronic Health Conditions with Dr. Selvi Vasudevan. So why don't we dig in a little bit further to the relationship in terms of some of the dietary changes you made or lifestyle, you mentioned mindset, and then the relationship with Crohn's disease.
Mm-hmm. And that's the piece that I love, just about holistic health, is how everything sort of interplays into everything. And that was, for me, looking at the body as a whole and understanding it as a whole was really a game changer. And so in terms of food, I feel like people get so frustrated in the IBD community with Crohn's, with ulcerative colitis, because there's so much information. Like there's an overwhelm of information. People are like, I just don't know what to do. One person will say go vegan, another person will say go paleo, another person will talk about the SCD diet and the AIP and everything in between, right? And my joke is, and then the ABCD. And it's figuring out what works for your own body, and that takes persistence, it takes practice. And so now I have a way of helping people to figure out what works for their own body, because what worked for me might not be the exact same thing that works for someone. And even my own body has evolved over time. So I remember starting off gluten-free, and then I eventually went paleo, and now like my style of eating is much more intuitive. So it's evolved over time. So which is why when people come to me and say, I've tried everything, things might have changed now as opposed to what they were 6 months ago, 3 months ago, 5 years ago, that sort of thing. And so it really just depends. And, sometimes people get frustrated when I say that, but it's really true, because it just really depends on your body, on your particular situation, what's going to work in terms of food. And so I help people to figure out that piece, right? What really works for you and what doesn't work for you, which is very unique. So there's that piece. And then you're asking about lifestyle, and that is another big piece. So everything from sleep to stress to mindset, to physical activity, to your relationships, all of those pieces play a piece into how your Crohn's does, because let's face it, autoimmune disease, chronic illness, IBD, it affects every single aspect of your life. There's no separation, right? So all of those pieces of your life need to be addressed in a way that supports your health, that supports your healing, as opposed to, contributing more to your illness or not giving you peace of mind, which is really going to help you to heal on a deeper level.
Episode 69, The Role of Yoga in Mental Health with Laura Bauman. Yeah, and so you've mentioned a morning practice. So is that the best time, do you find? Like, is there a specific time of day, or does that vary? And then, location-wise, is there a better location compared to another? Or, just logistically, and how do you make sure you fit it in, I guess?
Yeah. At the moment, I work with moms, so it's my biggest thing is to be kind to yourself, do what you can, where you can, when you can. For me personally, I function the best early in the morning. I wake up really early, and I like to do my morning practice when everybody's asleep. I feel I have a lot more energy, a lot more focus. And once my day starts, it just gets away. Like if I skip it, I know it's just not going to happen. But there are people who are, who just do better with an evening stretch or a nice evening meditation. And if that's for you, then great. And that's the thing with yoga. It's a tool to become aware of yourself, know where what works for you. And I used to be much more my boot camp mentality, I guess, like do your morning practice, but if you're a new mom, that's just not realistic, and that's okay. You don't have to beat yourself up about it. It's a temporary, it's temporary that your baby is little and your sleep is out of whack, and it's just not feasible, and that's fine. Then find, if you can, find another, like find 1 minute to do a gentle stretch for your shoulders or something, and it doesn't have to be a full-blown practice as well.
Episode 70, Living to Our Full Potential with mindset coach Marina B. So how does one, in those cases, I guess we've both been able to kind of self-identify an issue there, but how does one know if they're maybe off track in terms of their purpose? Are there signs that you should look for that you're not really living to your full potential, or is it just something that you just know?
It depends on the person. Some people just know. Some people, it just takes really asking them very purposely. And it really just takes taking some time to become aware of how you feel. I mean, how we feel about ourselves, about our lives on a daily basis is going to be a huge clue. If we're feeling good and we're feeling productive and we feel like, I do think that that's a little bit of an instinctual feeling. Like, are you feeling like you're living the life that you want to live? Or are you feeling kind of stuck? Sometimes it's about looking at your behaviors and your actions, and are those aligning with your values and the things that you really care about? Or are you maybe stuck in certain behaviors that don't serve you, but you think they're serving you because they're kind of keeping you safe where you are, which is a little bit of what I was talking about before. But a lot of self-sabotaging behaviors can, it could be, and it looks like a lot of things, a lot of different types of addictive behaviors, whether they're around food or drinking or Netflix watching or shopping or, all sorts of behaviors that are precluding you from doing anything else. But what's happening then is that if you look at your life and you think, I'm not really doing things that I actually care about. So there's it's not aligned, right? Like, you want to look at your life and are the things that I'm spending my time doing and the people that I'm with aligning with my values and what I really care about? And so a lot of what we do in the beginning of a coaching relationship is go through these assessments where you talk about and identify and reveal for yourself, what are the things that are most important to you in your life? What do you care about most? We go through a lot of prioritizing and ranking, and then we look at, are you giving the areas that you characterize as the most important in your life the most effort or not? Where is the alignment?
Episode 71, Body Typology 101 with naturopath Sue Ann Hickey. Maybe you can dig more in. How is the body typology system maybe different than kind of a lot of the wellness guides or other diets that we see? And a lot of those focus on restriction that many of us have been through. So I'm just wondering how the system is so different, and kind of give us a glimpse into how you felt great.
Yeah, sure. I think the challenge with so many restrictive diets is people that want to lose weight, they try and find something that's a little too harsh, too restrictive. They want to lose weight quickly. They want the press the fast forward button, and it's not sustainable is the main thing. They're depriving themselves. They're not really happy. The keto is one thing people do, which I find can be, you can have clean keto, which it can be okay, but then you have the really heavy fat, high fat, low carb keto, which can be detrimental to our health. And there's hardly any fiber in the diet, so people get really constipated. Mm-hmm. So there's too many, restrictive, hardcore diets that people are doing. With body type and eating right for your body type, the way it works is, as I said, it works with your glands. So we distinguish 4 different types, either adrenal, pituitary, thyroid, or for the woman only, there's gonad, which has to do with the ovaries. Now, some people might think, oh, I have hypothyroid, so therefore I must be thyroid type. No, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't mean that anything is wrong with the glands. It's just that we each have a dominant gland that's working harder than the others, and the other glands are trying to catch up. So when we start eating the right foods at the right time for our body type, that dominant gland calms down and the other glands get stronger. And that's what creates the balance. Like the whole body physically feels better. And, I teach a lot more than that in nutrition, how to replace ordinary foods with more nutritionally dense alternatives so people feel satisfied longer. They're not reaching as much for unhealthy snacks in between meals. So it's really a healthy way of eating that people can sustain long term, which in my opinion is the most important thing, right? We don't want this restrictive diet we're going to do for a certain amount of time because we want to wear the dress to the wedding or whatever.
Right.
The main goal I want my clients to have is to help improve their health, increase their health, and focus on being healthy and happy and eating a healthy way with some deviations, as I call them. I don't like the word cheats. And, enjoying those deviations, not feeling guilty. And then you're on track most of the time. And that's the way to make it healthy long term.
Episode 72, Finding Alignment with Career Coach Penelope Lazel. So then, do you believe that everyone really has a specific career purpose?
Completely. And I loved that question. Absolutely love that question. I really do. And I think the clues are there. I think the clues are there when we're children and we're starting to find things that we enjoy, things we don't enjoy, and we start to grow. And you will find that when you go into whatever career it is, there'll be elements from your childhood that will come through. So for me, having been in recruitment for so long, I knew it was for me. So if I take it back to 20 years ago when I fell into recruitment, and I literally fell into it, I was doing customer service at that point, and I'd been made redundant. I took a temping job and I ended up in a recruitment job. For me, I'm a people person. I loved finding people jobs. And I've always been a purple, which is why I'd gone into the customer service side. So I knew that I'd found my place in the world just because it made my heart sing. And I think everybody's got that within them somewhere. It's just a matter of finding it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then it sounds like it's finding the purpose, but then kind of working in the right way for your own mental health.
Completely, yeah. So I don't like to take it back to the recruitment side of things. I love what I do, absolutely love it, but it can be unforgiving. Mm-hmm. So early on in my career where I was trying to make an impression, I wanted to really, stand out. I'm new to recruitment. I was quite late in my 20s when I found it. That was my first burnout. I was working 24 hours a day, because I was on call 24/7. I would do really long hours. I'd leave the house at about 3:00 in the morning and I'd be home at about 10 o'clock. I'd then be on call overnight and sometimes I'd be woken up at midnight. There was just no stopping. And because I put myself in that roller coaster, as much as I loved it, the ill health came from it. And unfortunately, a couple of years later, I was a bit of a mess. So it's about finding the job that you love, but then being able to work within it to a way that's harmonious to you. And if you can find that, happy days. It's lovely.
Mm-hmm. Episode 73, Holistic Mental Health Practices for Teens with Devorah Goldenblatt. So I know you mentioned a few kind of teen issues there, but can you share some of the top mental health concerns that you're seeing in teens specifically right now? And then I guess even if there are some specific disorders that you're seeing a lot of, it'd be great to know.
Yeah, well, definitely. Unfortunately, really depression and anxiety are rising in our young adults year after year after year. So we're seeing, a 50 to 60% increase over the last 10 years of kids being diagnosed, by kids, I mean teens, especially the 14 to 17 age group being diagnosed with anxiety and depression. And suicide, unfortunately, is rising too. So, there's so many, right. I mean, that's typically who I see is, clients who have a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety. That's rising. We're seeing a lot more self-harm, unfortunately. And a lot of disordered eating as well. Mm-hmm. And it's really hard for kids. It's hard for a lot of different reasons. And we're all kind of trying to figure it out. There's a lot of hand wringing and there's a lot of finger pointing. And I think it's so important to for everybody to be noticing this and, covering it in the media. And I also feel like at the same time that we're pointing fingers and digging and wringing our hands, we should also be teaching these kids these like often evidence-based, not always. I have some really weird woo-woo stuff that I do too, but a lot of it, like EFT tapping or mindfulness, is completely based in research, is proven to help with these conditions. And it's fascinating to me that we're not bringing it, fascinating is not the word, more like unconscionable, that we're not bringing it to all these kids, in the meantime, while we figure out why this is going on.
No, that makes sense. And do you hear from them or even their parents maybe, like, what are some of those specific issues? Like, are you seeing COVID is a really big one that's kind of inciting things, or are you seeing, the social media side? Is there anything in particular that's bubbling up?
Interesting. I mean, definitely social media plays a role. It's interesting. All the kids are on TikTok as an example. I just said TikTok because I was just eating one. No, but TikTok, they're all on it. And what people don't realize, besides for the fact that, you're scrolling, it's a time waster, although a fun one. But the fact is that the algorithms work to show you more of what you're interested in. So when a kid will watch, let's say, a video that has some self-harm or disordered eating or something, even if they've just stumbled on it or they've watched it because they're curious, the algorithm will then continue to show them more of that thing. I mean,
right.
That's how TikTok is built. So, and YouTube is the same, not to the same extent, but you're shown more of what if the algorithm thinks you want to see. So you end up with a situation where late at night, these kids can go down this endless rabbit hole. And that's, I'm not saying that's what's responsible for what we're seeing, but it definitely doesn't help. That's for sure.
Episode 76, Overcoming Dysfunctional Eating with Amy Johnson.
For me, I think something that's really, really important, and the first thing that I do with clients is get to the root cause. So kind of, talking on an individual level about stuff that we're talking about today, like thinking about getting to the root cause of why they developed the behaviors that they developed, why they have the thoughts that they have and the beliefs that they have about their body or about food. And just like really unpacking that and kind of putting responsibility where it belongs and kind of taking it off of them a little bit, like it makes sense that you have these behaviors and it's not your fault. And at the same time, like you get to choose what to believe and how to feel moving forward. It takes work and it takes practice, but so getting to the root cause, I think, is really, really important. And then also doing work around emotional intelligence, because like I was saying, in my case, my disordered eating was really a coping mechanism. And, essentially I just had a bunch of really big feelings and like some pain that I just literally didn't know how to handle. And so I had to come up with a way to avoid it and to numb myself out. So that was how I developed my more severe disordered eating. And so working on emotional intelligence, working with being able to, first of all, feel safe enough to feel your feelings and feel safe enough to kind of be in your body and feel what your body is experiencing. And then, and being able to know what you're feeling and have tools to be with those feelings and to cope with those feelings without having to turn to food or to sort of beating yourself up. So then another really important piece is self-compassion and shifting from, using self-compassion as a motivator for change, as opposed to like self-discipline or self-punishment. And then a really big tool that I use with my clients is intuitive eating. So I kind of do some foundational work first in terms of like being able to feel connected to the body first, because intuitive eating is all about relearning how to listen to your body's cues and actually eat when you're hungry and stop eating when you're full, and eat what you want to eat and know what you want to eat. It kind of like having an internal guide post for that, as opposed to looking to external sources to know what and when to eat. So intuitive eating is a big part of it, but I kind of do this foundational work to kind of get ready for that.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And with some of the, like, replacing the coping mechanism piece and the self-compassion, like, are there specific, tools that you're using? Like, is journaling something, or meditation? Are there different things like that you're working in?
Yeah, for sure. I think I personally find writing to be a really powerful tool, just as a way to reflect and connect with yourself. I give my clients a lot of writing prompts and writing exercises. I think too, any kind of practice that can help you feel embodied and be in your body and be okay to be there and feel what's going on. So yoga is definitely a big tool that I use for that. And meditation is a great tool for that. Being able to sit and let things happen and be okay with it and not react or beat yourself up about it. And then I think also just talking and sharing with another person is really powerful. So the conversations that we have, I think, are really important. And in terms of self-compassion, I really think that is just sort of an awareness and a practice. So once you start to, the first step is to really notice how you talk to yourself. Like, noticing self-talk is something that I do with my clients, and I've done with myself, constantly. But just first noticing how you're treating yourself and noticing how you talk about yourself, noticing your thoughts and your words and your beliefs, and sort of noticing if it's compassionate. And usually it's not. Usually it's pretty harsh. And then from there, once you've noticed, then you're aware of it, then you can start to shift it. And it just takes time and practice of constantly and each moment trying your best to be compassionate to yourself, trying your best to talk to yourself in a different way. And it just takes time. But the thing that I say to people to encourage them is, like, it took you, however many years, like 20 something, 30 something years to get to this point. And you've been talking to yourself in a certain way for a really long time. So, once you become aware of it, that's huge. And then it's going to take some time once you start talking to yourself in a different way for it to really sink in and for you to really feel the change.
Episode 77, Everything You Need to Know About Allergies with Dr. Karen Kaufman. What symptoms we should be watching for with anaphylaxis. I've heard so much different advice. Some of that saying that, one symptom can be enough to be showing anaphylaxis. Other times I've heard it should be a multi-system reaction. And, like I said, as a parent, you're never totally sure what you're looking for. So I just wondered if you could dig in a bit.
Absolutely. So when it comes to anaphylaxis, symptoms typically fall within 4 major categories, or these are the body systems I think that you're referring to.
Right.
And I try to simplify everything and group them into big groups to help patients and parents remember them easier. So the 4 groups that I like to think about in the setting of systemic allergic response include the skin, the respiratory tract, the gastrointestinal tract, and the cardiovascular system. So as an example, when we're talking about skin symptoms, this could be something like hives or swelling of the skin. It could be generalized redness, itching, or even flushing. So lots of variation of skin symptoms, but all completely limited to the skin. And just to kind of give a quick follow-up on skin before going to the others, I've also heard a lot of kind of misinformation out there in the community. And some people think that it's more severe if you have skin reaction on your face versus skin reaction on your torso or whatever. And that's not true. So skin is skin. So if it's only affecting the skin, that's just one body system. The respiratory symptoms typically look like what we see in the setting of asthma. So this could be coughing, repeated coughing, chest tightness. It could be difficulty breathing or labored breathing, the feeling of being short of breath, or any audible aspects of breathing like what we call wheezing or stridor, which are both sounds that are abnormal that are made in the setting of respiratory obstruction. The gastrointestinal symptoms that can occur typically are related to swelling somewhere in the GI tract. So often, I always think about the GI tract as anywhere where our food goes from beginning to end. So we're talking about swelling inside of the mouth or in the throat. Swelling can also happen in the gut. And when that happens, we're really talking about manifestations of, severe cramping, abdominal pain, profound nausea. Often it's vomiting, or it could even be immediate diarrhea. So again, the body is trying to push it out and get it out some way or another.
Okay.
The cardiovascular symptoms, I think, are the ones that are the scariest, especially for parents with young children, because it's hard to really put your finger on it sometimes. And so, what we're really talking about are symptoms relating to a drop in blood pressure. So people might feel lightheaded or dizzy, or they may feel like they could pass out or lose consciousness. But of course, in a young kid, especially who may not be able to verbalize that, I always tell parents that it's always important to watch, your kid's behavior. And if they go from being kind of a normal, active, child, toddler, or young kid especially, and all of a sudden become suddenly lethargic immediately following an ingestion, to me, that's concerning. I mean, nobody's going to walk around with a blood pressure cuff on their arm, so we don't really know exactly what's happening. But to me, that would be a very worrisome sign. As a parent, I would be on the lookout for that as well.
Episode 79, Womb Wisdom, Ancestral Healing, and Meditation with Catherine Hall.
The power of meditation. It's something we underestimate still, but I think people are really catching on to it more and more. So in the energy field, just to explain it from this point of view, the energy field has several layers, and one of them is a mental layer. And the mental layer is one of the most outward layers of the energy field. So what this means is that thoughts are like energy. And so our thoughts affect then the inner layers of the energy field, which are the emotions and the body. So if you think of a thought, you get, triggered on social media, or somebody sends you a text message that is very triggering, then it is immediately, with that trigger is being felt in the body as an emotion, an energy in motion. It's often bringing up something repressed from the past. And then that's felt in the physical body. And if left untended to, like a garden that hasn't been weeded, those things will infiltrate our body, infiltrate our mind, and we'll become very anxious because we won't have the space. So from a physical perspective, we need to meditate or weed the garden, so to speak. So we are always making space for those things to bloom within us. That's from a physical standpoint. And because the mind has such an impact on those emotions and on the body itself. So it's kind of like, we can't really afford not to meditate. It's, at some point on our journey, those of us that are really seeking to heal ourselves and become more sovereign in our health, we always somehow find meditation because it's a natural stepping stone to being well, like fully and completely.
Episode 80, Recovering from Life Stressors with Dr. Janine Krause.
Yeah. So, one of the number one things, because with COVID, a lot of the shutdowns, a lot of folks are working from home, and it's a new dynamic because we're like, okay, so now I don't leave. The brain doesn't have that separation between home and work. So I was working a lot and still am with routines and getting outside of the house, getting out in the morning for first morning light, even if it's raining, just getting out there, sit on the porch, get your raincoat on, 5 minutes, something to like tell the body like, hey, it's morning. We're going to get out of this box that we live in, and we're just going to just connect a little with nature. And then taking breaks during the day and like really hammering on yourself to take the break. Because if you don't escape from the work situation, it just keeps, the stressors keep compounding and your brain just doesn't get a moment to chill. Then the next thing was also an evening wind down routine to be able to tell your body like, hey, work's over. We're going to separate from this place. And you go outside. If you can get your feet in the grass, your feet in the sand, something to kind of ground you, stick your feet in some water if you live nearby a stream or lake or sound like I do here in the Pacific Northwest, but something of that nature so that you can have that like hard stop on work so that your brain knew the difference. And then a lot of the other tips that I had is really working with yourself on what's going on within the home and structure and looking at stress triggers. And one of the big things that I found for a lot of people and females in particular with COVID was a lot of stress eating and a lot of like taking laps through the kitchen and eating, just boredom eating. And so we had to work a lot on what was being brought into the house, what were you shopping for, but also taking a really hard look at, once again, going back to those stress triggers, journaling and becoming very aware of what happens to your brain when and what thought processes you have when you're triggered by a certain stressor. So this year, I think was like year and a half was like the year of awareness for folks in my office. And my tips really kind of went down to get to know yourself better, know where you self-sabotage, know where you're a rock star, and let's dial that in. That's kind of like my big thing.
Thank you to all of the amazing guests that were part of these episodes. Honestly, I had so much fun going through these first 8 months of 2021 and picking the clips, and it was just a wonderful reminder of all of the knowledge and information that has been shared by these wonderful guests throughout the year. And also thank you to you for listening. And if you're a new listener, maybe this will interest you in exploring some of the past episodes that you haven't listened to yet, and you can start to work through and find those from this best of. I hope that everybody has had a great holiday season and continues to as we move into the new year. Have you read my novel Pendulum by S.E. German yet? If not, what are you waiting for? And if you have, I would love to hear from you. If you don't know about Pendulum, it's a heartwarming story about a young boy who starts to experience neuropsychiatric symptoms after an infection. We follow the boy as he goes through many regular, real middle grade issues like moving, having a crush, playing sports, also while experiencing neuropsychiatric symptoms like anxiety, OCD, tics, panic attacks, and more. If you're interested in checking out Pendulum by S.E. German, it is available through Amazon worldwide, where you can even see a preview of the book, or you can listen to Chapter 1, which is on episode 64 of the Learning to Slay the Beast podcast. I hope you enjoy the novel, and thanks for your support. Thank you for listening to the Learning to Slay the Beast podcast. Please keep in mind, this podcast is not intended to be medical or professional advice. If you'd like to hear more from me, you can follow me on social media, Instagram and TikTok at Sarah Lady Gluten, or Facebook, Sarah_gluten-free lady. You can also visit my website, which includes author information, speaking information, and more info on the podcast at www.se-german.com. If you like the podcast, please feel free to review the podcast on your favorite platform and also subscribe, because it means that it will show up for you every week on your favorite podcast platform. Also, we've just started to have the ability to support the podcast. You can find this link in my Instagram bio or visit Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/learning to slay the beasts. Thanks again for listening, and have a great week.